While everyone celebrates their year-end bonuses, I'm sitting here staring at an empty bank account and a rejection email. But here's what my former boss doesn't know yet. Their biggest client just signed with me instead. The phone call I'm about to make will change everything forever. I still remember the exact moment everything changed. Tuesday morning, 9:47 a.m., sitting at my desk with my coffee getting cold while I logged into my bank account. You know that feeling when you're expecting something good, like Christmas morning when you were 8 years old? That's exactly how I felt scrolling down to check my balance. Nothing. My bonus wasn't there. Not a single extra penny beyond my regular salary. I refreshed the page 3 times, thinking maybe the bank was slow or something was wrong with my internet. But no, still nothing. Here's the thing that really gets me. Last year alone, companies in the US paid out over $12 billion in bonuses. $12 billion. That's enough money to buy a small country, and apparently none of it was meant for me. Makes sense, right? Well, not really. I've been hitting my sales targets for 3 years straight. Not just meeting them, absolutely crushing them. Twice I broke company records, and both times my boss acted like it was some team effort. Team effort my ass. I was the one making those calls, building those relationships, closing those deals until midnight on Fridays, while everyone else was already halfway through their happy hour drinks. But here's where it gets really interesting. I started asking around, very carefully of course. You can't just walk up to people and demand to know their bank balance. That's weird. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I became a detective. Coffee conversations turned into casual mentions about weekend plans. Oh, you're going to Cabo? Nice. Translation, they got their bonus. Every single one of my male coworkers had received theirs. On time. Full amount. No questions asked. When I finally worked up the courage to email HR, and trust me, that took 2 days of drafting and redrafting because I didn't want to sound desperate, their response was almost insulting in its simplicity. Thanks for reaching out. We'll look into this. Maybe next quarter? Maybe next quarter? Are you kidding me? That's not how bonuses work. They're not like Christmas presents that you can just reschedule when it's convenient. I earned that money. I worked 60-hour weeks, missed my sister's birthday party, and turned down 3 job interviews because I thought this company valued me. The worst part? I kept thinking maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was some logical explanation I wasn't seeing. Maybe I had misunderstood something about the bonus structure. But deep down, in that place where you keep the truths you don't want to admit, I knew exactly what was happening. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. Little comments in meetings, who got invited to important discussions, and who didn't. The way conversations would shift when I walked into the break room. Well, let me tell you something, once you start noticing these patterns, you can't stop seeing them everywhere. And what I discovered next made my missing bonus look like the least of my problems. The bonus thing was bad enough, but then the whispers started. You know how office gossip works. One person accidentally mentions something by the coffee machine, and suddenly everyone's looking at you like you're wearing a scarlet letter. Except instead of adultery, my crime was apparently being expendable. I'd walk into the break room, and conversations would just stop. Dead silence. People would suddenly find their phones fascinating or remember urgent emails they needed to check. Makes sense, right? Nobody wants to be seen chatting with the person who might be getting the axe. Here's what really gets me. More than half of workplace revenge stories start exactly like this. With humiliation, with that gut-wrenching feeling that everyone knows something you don't, and they're all waiting to see how you'll handle it when the hammer drops. My friend Sarah from accounting finally spilled it during lunch. Management's been asking weird questions about your workload, she whispered, glancing around like we were planning a heist. They wanted to know how much training it would take for someone else to handle your accounts. Well, that's comforting. The meetings started happening without me too. You know those quick strategy sessions that used to include everyone? Suddenly I'm not getting the calendar invites. My boss, Dave, who used to joke around with me about his weekend golf disasters, started giving me these tight-lipped smiles that didn't reach his eyes. Professional distance, they call it. I call it cowardly. Then there were the project discussions where my input just didn't matter anymore. I'd suggest something, and Dave would nod politely and then completely ignore what I said. It's like being a ghost at your own job. You're there, you're talking, but nobody's really hearing you. The worst part, my so-called work friends started treating me like I had some contagious disease. Lisa, who I'd helped land her promotion last year, suddenly became too busy for our usual coffee breaks. Mark stopped including me in the group chat where we used to complain about management. Even the receptionist, sweet old Helen, started giving me these pitying looks that made my skin crawl. But you want to know the really twisted part? I was still hitting my numbers, still closing deals, still making the company money hand over fist while they're all acting like I'm some kind of liability. The hypocrisy was enough to make me want to scream. 20% of workers end up taking some kind of revenge after their ideas get stolen or ignored. I wasn't there yet, but I could feel something shifting inside me, that familiar burn of being underestimated, of being treated like I didn't matter when I knew damn well I did. Every day felt like walking through a minefield, waiting for someone to finally have the guts to tell me what everyone apparently already knew. The tension was eating me alive, and the worst part was pretending everything was normal when it clearly wasn't. Little did they know, their biggest mistake wasn't planning to get rid of me. It was forgetting exactly how valuable I really was to this place. You know what's funny about being undervalued at work? Sometimes you don't realize how much power you actually hold until someone tries to push you around. Well, maybe funny isn't the right word, more like terrifyingly ironic. I've been managing our company's biggest account for 3 years now. $8 million worth of business flows through my desk every quarter. And honestly, I'm not even sure my boss remembers the client's name half the time. But me? I know everything about this account. I know that Mr. Richardson prefers calls on Tuesday mornings because his board meetings are Wednesdays. I know his wife's birthday is coming up because he always mentions wanting to close deals before taking time off. I even know he hates our competitors' pushy sales tactics because he's complained about them during our monthly check-ins. The thing is, losing a major client can cost a company up to 20% of their annual earnings. That's not just some number I pulled out of thin air. That's real money, real consequences, real panic in the C-suite when things go wrong. And right now, while they're treating me like I'm disposable, they have no idea how much they depend on this one relationship I've built. Richardson trusts me. Not the company, not my boss who swoops in occasionally to schmooze. He trusts me specifically. When there was that supply chain issue last year, he called my direct line at 7 in the morning because he knew I'd handle it. When his previous vendor tried to poach him back with a lower rate, he didn't even consider it because, in his words, why would I leave when I have someone who actually gets it? But here's what really gets me, my boss rarely even talks to Richardson directly anymore. I'm the bridge, the translator, the one keeping this whole thing running smoothly. Every email goes through me first. Every concern gets filtered through my understanding of what Richardson actually needs versus what he thinks he wants. I've become indispensable to this relationship, and they're too busy playing their little power games to notice. The contract sits in my filing cabinet, and I've read it more times than I care to admit. There's this clause about designated representative choice that most people probably skip over. Basically, the client has the right to request specific team members for their account management. Richardson has never had to use it because I've been consistent, reliable, always there when he needs something handled. Makes sense, right? You build trust with a person, not a logo on a business card. And while my company is busy making me feel replaceable, they're completely missing the fact that some relationships aren't as transferable as they think. Richardson doesn't call the main number when there's an issue, he calls me. He doesn't email the generic sales inbox, he has my direct contact saved in his phone. But something tells me they're about to learn just how valuable those personal connections really are. The question isn't whether I'm replaceable, it's whether they can afford to find out. You know what's funny about breaking points? You never see them coming until you're already shattered on the floor, wondering how the hell you got there. Well, maybe that's not entirely true. I'd been collecting cracks for months, but I kept telling myself I was fine. Everything was manageable. I was stronger than this petty office bullshit. Then came the Morrison Project meeting. 3 months of my life poured into research, market analysis, client psychology breakdowns, you name it, I'd mapped it out. I walked into that conference room with a presentation that could have made us millions. 20 slides of pure gold, backed by data that would make a statistician weep with joy. My boss, Derek, barely looked up from his phone when I started talking. The other executives? Half of them were checking emails. The other half looked like they'd rather be getting root canals. But here's the kicker. When I finished, Derek actually yawned. A full-blown, didn't even cover his mouth yawn. Thanks for the input, he said. Like I just suggested we switch coffee brands. But we're going with Johnson's approach instead. Johnson's approach. Let me paint you a picture of Johnson's genius strategy. Let's just do what we did last year, but make the logo bigger. Revolutionary stuff, really. The man couldn't strategize his way out of a paper bag if you gave him scissors and a map. 20% of workers take revenge after their ideas are stolen or ignored. I looked that up later, and honestly, I'm surprised the number isn't higher. Because what happened next made my blood pressure spike so high, I thought I might actually stroke out right there on the conference room carpet. Derek turns to the room and says, "From now on, we just need you to execute, not innovate. Just do your job. Just do my job." Like I was some entry-level intern who'd wandered into the wrong meeting. The same woman who'd brought in $8 million was being told to sit down, shut up, and follow orders. Everyone expects you to smile and nod when they crush your soul. That's the unspoken rule, right? Take it gracefully. Be professional. Don't make waves. Well, I was drowning in their waves, so professional could kiss my ass. The real nail in the coffin came 2 days later. I'm walking past Derek's office, and his door is cracked open just enough for me to hear him talking to the VP. "Honestly, she's becoming dead weight," he says. Probably gesturing with that stupid stress ball he's always squeezing. How hard could it be to replace her? Sales reps are a dime a dozen. Dead weight, a dime a dozen. The woman who'd been carrying their biggest account like Atlas holding up the world was apparently disposable. Replaceable, forgettable. That's when something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped. Like a rubber band that had been stretched too far for too long. They thought I was powerless, just another cog in their machine. But they'd forgotten something important about cogs. Remove the right one, and the whole machine falls apart. Time to remind them exactly how valuable this particular piece of dead weight really was. You know what's funny about revenge? People think it's all about blind rage and stupid mistakes. Well, maybe for some people. But when you've been pushed around for months, when your so-called colleagues treat you like yesterday's garbage, you start thinking differently. You get strategic. I wasn't going to storm into my boss's office screaming about fairness. That's what amateurs do. Instead, I did something way more dangerous. I started reading every single page of that client contract I'd been managing for 2 years. The one worth $8 million that everyone suddenly forgot I was handling. And wouldn't you know it? Buried in Section 12, subsection C, there it was. A clause about representative choice and transition protocols. Basically, if the primary contact person, that would be me, left the company, the client had the right to request continued service through their preferred representative. Makes sense, right? Clients don't want to start over with some random new person who doesn't know their business. Here's the thing about corporate contracts. They're written by lawyers who think about every possible scenario except the one where their own employee might actually use these clauses against them. 23% of workplace revenge stories involve this kind of strategic planning, and now I understand why. When you're methodical, when you actually think it through, you realize how many tools are sitting right there waiting for you. I started making lists. What did my client really value? Speed was huge. They hated waiting for responses. Trust mattered even more. They'd told me things about their business they'd never share with just anyone. Personal attention was everything to them. When their CEO's daughter got married last spring, I sent flowers. When their quarterly numbers looked rough, I stayed late helping them prepare talking points for their board meeting. My company saw dollar signs. I saw relationships. The weird part is how easy it was to research competitor firms online. 3 companies offered similar services, but one stood out immediately. Better terms, faster response times, and this made me laugh. They actually advertised about treating employees fairly. Their bonus structure was transparent, posted right on their careers page. Imagine that. I spent my evenings building what I called my transition contact list. Every vendor my client worked with, every department head I'd collaborated with, every detail that made their account run smoothly. 2 years of relationship building, all documented in a neat little spreadsheet. My company probably thought this information lived in some shared database. But why would it? I was the one handling everything. The best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting prepared. While my coworkers were gossiping about who might get fired next, while my boss was probably planning how to explain my missing bonus again, I was quietly building something they'd never see coming. Then there is the moment when preparation meets opportunity. And that phone call was about to change everything forever. The phone call that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my car before work, staring at the office building that had basically spit in my face for months. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from pure adrenaline. I dialed Marcus, my $8 million client. The man who trusted me more than his own mother trusted banks. "Hey Marcus, got a minute?" I kept my voice casual, like we weren't about to blow up my entire career. "I've been thinking about my future lately. You know how it is, sometimes you outgrow where you are." There was this pause. Then he said something that made my heart skip. "Funny you mention that. I've been wondering what would happen if you ever moved somewhere else." Well, that was easier than expected. Hypothetically, I said, because I'm not completely stupid, if I did make a change, would that affect our working relationship? Marcus laughed, actually laughed. "Are you kidding? You think I care about your company's logo? I work with you, not them. If you jumped ship, I'd probably follow you before you even unpacked your desk." 20 minutes later, I hung up with butterflies doing cartwheels in my stomach. He'd basically handed me a golden ticket, wrapped it in a bow, and told me to run with it. That afternoon, I called the competitor who'd been circling like a shark for months. "Remember that contact list I'd been building? Time to use it." The conversation was short and sweet. They wanted me, they wanted my client relationships, and they were willing to pay for both. The offer came through email 2 hours later. Base salary? Higher than what I was making. Signing bonus? More than the bonus my current company had forgotten to give me. Commission structure? Actually fair. I printed that offer letter and held it like it was made of gold. Thursday morning, I walked into my boss's office with my resignation letter. No drama, no speeches about how they'd screwed me over. Just professional courtesy wrapped around a nuclear bomb. "I'm giving my 2 weeks notice," I said, sliding the paper across his desk. "Personal career growth opportunity." He looked confused, maybe even a little panicked. "Is this about the bonus situation? We can discuss that." Too late, buddy. Way too late. I didn't mention Marcus, didn't mention the new job, just smiled and said I was exploring new directions. Friday afternoon, less than 24 hours after I'd cleaned out my desk, Marcus called his old contact at my former company. The conversation was brief. "I'm terminating our contract. My account representative is no longer with your firm." By Monday, he'd signed with my new company. $8 million. Gone. Just like that. The funny thing about bridges, sometimes you don't burn them, you just take all the good stuff with you when you cross to the other side. But the real fireworks were just getting started. My phone started buzzing at 7:43 a.m. the next morning. Then again at 7:51. By 8:15, I had 12 missed calls from my old boss Marcus. The voicemails got progressively more desperate. First professional, then pleading. Finally borderline pathetic. "We need to discuss the Morrison account transition timeline," he said in message 3. Message 7 was just heavy breathing, and what sounded like him crying into his coffee. Makes sense, right? When you lose $8 million overnight, even grown men break down. But here's the thing I didn't expect. The absolute chaos that followed wasn't just about the money. Losing big clients can lower a company's stock price for weeks, and apparently our little drama made the morning finance reports. Marcus wasn't just dealing with one angry account. He was fielding calls from investors, board members, and probably his own boss demanding explanations he couldn't give. The funniest part, he actually tried to salvage the relationship. Called Morrison directly. Something he'd never bothered to do in the 3 years I managed that account. Morrison later told me Marcus spent 20 minutes explaining company policies and restructuring plans. You know what Morrison said back? "Where's Sarah? I only work with Sarah." Well, Marcus couldn't exactly say I'd quit to join their competitor and taken their biggest client with me. So he fumbled through some story about transitions and new opportunities. Morrison hung up on him. Then there's the domino effect. Nobody talks about in business school. HR scrambled. My exit made other staff question their loyalty, especially when word got out about the bonus situation. Apparently, 3 other sales reps marched into HR demanding explanations about their own compensation. One threatened to quit on the spot. Jessica from accounting texted me Tuesday night. "Girl, this place is falling apart. Half the sales team is updating their resumes." By Wednesday, I had LinkedIn messages from 5 former coworkers asking about openings at my new company. The irony wasn't lost on me. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be my friend. Marcus tried one last desperate move. He showed up at Morrison's office unannounced with flowers, fancy chocolates, and a new contract proposal with better terms. Morrison's assistant wouldn't even let him pass the lobby. That image still makes me laugh. This 6-foot executive holding a bouquet like some rejected prom date. And the weird part is, I felt almost guilty, not about leaving or taking Morrison. they deserved that. But watching the company scramble, seeing good people worry about their jobs, knowing I'd essentially triggered an earthquake, almost guilty. Not quite, but almost. My story spread through the industry faster than office gossip. Sales conferences, networking events, industry newsletters, everyone knew about the rep who walked away with an $8 million client. Some called it brilliant, others called it ruthless. But you know what they really called it? A cautionary tale about what happens when companies forget that loyalty works both ways. And speaking of loyalty working both ways, my new company was about to show me exactly what that looked like. Walking into my new office for the first time felt like stepping into a parallel universe where people actually valued talent. The signing bonus hit my account exactly when they said it would. No games, no maybe next quarter nonsense. Funny how that works when companies actually respect their employees, right? My new boss handed me the client portfolio on day one. 3 accounts bigger than the one I'd brought over. "We trust you," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Trust. What a concept. Back at my old company, they treated me like I might steal the office supplies if left unsupervised. The weird part is how quickly everything fell into place. My old client, the $8 million account that used to be their crown jewel, was thriving under our new partnership. He'd tell anyone who'd listen that following me was the best business decision he'd made all year. Meanwhile, my former colleagues were probably still trying to figure out what hit them. Then there's the industry buzz. Word travels fast in our circle, and suddenly I wasn't just another sales rep grinding it out. People saw me as someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to claim it. Conference calls that used to feel like pulling teeth became collaborative conversations. Makes sense, right? When you're treated like an expert, you perform like one. But here's what really gets me. The ripple effect at my old company. 3 more reps quit within 2 months of my departure. Apparently, losing that account made management realize they had some serious retention problems. Too little, too late, if you ask me. They implemented this whole transparent bonus structure policy afterward, complete with written criteria and timelines. Groundbreaking stuff, really. Well, at least the new hires there might get treated fairly. Can't say I feel guilty about the chaos I left behind, though. 20 years of watching mediocre men get promoted while I carried their dead weight kind of hardens you to their struggles. My new company's quarterly results came out last month. Revenue up 18%, largely thanks to the accounts I brought in and expanded. They mentioned me by name in the company-wide email. By name. At my old job, I could have discovered the cure for cancer, and they would have credited it to team effort. The best part, I keep that old bonus denial letter in my desk drawer. Not out of bitterness, well, maybe a little bitterness, but as a reminder. Every time I doubt myself or consider settling for less, I pull it out and remember exactly what happens when you let people undervalue you. Some nights, I wonder if my former boss still thinks about that conversation where he dismissed my concerns. Does he connect the dots between his arrogance and losing their biggest client? Probably not. Men like him rarely do, but revenge isn't always about them learning their lesson. Sometimes it's just about you finally learning yours.